Tom House, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here. I'll tell you what, with a name as long as yours, if you were on my squad, I would be calling you Alphabet Soup or iChart. I'm not quite sure which.
You know what's funny? When I first started working, the nickname that I was given by my coworkers was Scrabble because they
Yeah.
thought my
Well,
full name was like a game of Scrabble.
yeah.
So
It's cool. It's nice to have a name that people have to ask, how do you spell that?
yeah, I also tell everyone, if you can pronounce my last name, I'll give you $5. Still to this day, I have not paid out that bet, so I think we're in the clear.
I can believe it. It's all good. You should go through life with a name like House, because I've been outhouse, you know, Hooker House, all the houses that could possibly be. Put my name in front of it, and let us go.
There you go. Tom, I am truly excited to have you on today. You are a legend in many respects, and I'm excited to dive into some of those areas. But before we even start the interview or get into some of these questions, I like to ask all my guests up front, if someone's just clicked on this interview and they have no idea who you are, why do you think they should stick around and listen to what you have to say?
I honestly believe that old age and treachery will overcome youth and exuberance at any time. And what I kind of represent, if someone came on first time, they would see an old guy talking to a young guy, and I would encourage them in the scheme of life, experience, knowledge, and wisdom is the path that everybody searches for. And what I represent is the wisdom of being on this planet for almost 80 years and being able to share it with the younger generation like yourself.
What's some of that wisdom?
Well, there you probably recognize the phrase old school versus new school.
Hmm.
When I first got involved with baseball, on the elite level, I would say elite being college and pro ball, they didn't have radar guns, they didn't have video. Um, the, uh, the people that taught the best were the ones that were the most experienced with actually screwing things up. And then there was the phrase, there's baseball's way, and then there's every other way out there. So baseball was kind of looked at as um, not just a science, but an art form. And that still carries over. But since then, in my observation, there's no time in the history of sport has technology been there to support what our eyes and our bodies need to do to be good at what you're, you know, pitching, hitting, whatever it might be. Baseball is probably, of all the skill sports, might be the toughest because it's really hard to put a round bat on a round ball. Um, the game has progressed. I think the athletes in today's game are exponentially better physically than my generation, but their skills aren't quite as developed. There's a lot of guys developing on the major league level, and that'll be something we should talk about today as we progress with our interview. But I think I'm in a really good spot right now where I'm still viable. I understand the technology and how to use it. And I don't think there's too many people out there that can talk about old school, the Sandy Koufaxes, and bring them up to speed with the schemes and the young studs that are pitching today. So it's a perspective thing. That was a rambling answer. They should listen to me because I've got perspective.
No, that's perfect. I like the fact that you brought up the impacts of technology, not just in sports, but we could even extrapolate this to society in general.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have seen. Let's stick to sports here just for a second for the sake of this argument. But I have seen people say, "Well, today's athletes are a lot more athletic. They're a lot more fine tuned. Technology has helped extend the longevity of a lot of these athletes. I mean, we look at people like Tom Brady, even someone like Aaron Rodgers, right? Like these guys are playing well into their 40s, which 20, 30, 40 years ago just didn't seem possible. I'll take tennis as an example. I'm a huge tennis fan, but what Djokovic is doing now with his longevity in the sport, it's really breaking barriers for a lot of people. If you go to soccer and you look at Cristiano Ronaldo, if you look at Messi even, I mean, these guys are playing into their late 30s, early 40s. So it's in a lot of ways, technology and the advances in medicine, especially, have helped the careers of these athletes, extend the careers of these athletes. But I have seen the argument that technology is a blessing and a curse because it makes life so much easier that maybe you forget some of those fundamentals and maybe you don't pay as close attention to some of these things because you do have technology there and it does help in so many ways. Has that been your experience? I'd love for you to just expand and give me your thoughts on how technology has shaped both baseball, football, all sports really, and the training.
That's a great question. The In my perspective, technology allows us to measure and quantify issues mechanically, strength-wise, mentally, emotionally, and nutrition for recovery. Those four performance absolutes. Technologies has allowed us to identify problems better than it's ever been identified before. But you have to be able to take one of those measurables and come up with a deliverable there for every problem that you identify. You have to come up with a fix or a teach to remediate what the issue is. Never have we been able to identify problems like we can right now. One of the problems that I see with getting um, uh, on the table with consensus on issues that are causing performance problems, coming up with a teach to fix it is where um, the younger coach of today's world hasn't quite got the experience to identify the shortened path to a fix. And that's where my generation, those old guys that are still hanging around, like myself, they usually have a pretty good fix for any problem that can be identified. And I think the collaboration. I'm going to do a little sidebar on you here. Baseball is a game of failure coached by negative people in a misinformation environment. And getting consensus on uh, problem ID and the solution to remediate that problem is where the issues lie in the coaching world today. So, what I tell when I'm in a situation where there might be a confrontation, I tell it, look, you can do anything you want, you can teach any way you want. Um, I'm going to look to tell you what I believe works, what I've researched, what I've used science and technology to support. And if we disagree, more power to you. Um, you can learn from anybody, even when it's not quite right. In fact, looking at a problem and having trouble solving that problem can teach you more than if somebody gives you an answer. So I used to be very confrontational when someone didn't agree with what I was teaching, but now I embrace it because two people that collaborate might walk away better for the experience. So as I'm getting older, I'm getting less and less rigid about somebody that teaches different than I do. And I think in the long haul, that's better for the athlete and his progression.
I do want to get back to something you just said. Baseball is a game of failure coached by negative people in a misinformation environment. I need you to expand on that. That's the first time I've heard baseball described in that manner.
Well, if you think about it, how many sports, if you fail 7 out of 10 times, how many sports would you still be playing for that team? So it's a very difficult sport to succeed in. And when the bar for a Hall of Fame hitter is right around 300, and Hall of Fame pitchers, if they start 400 ball games in the big leagues, they're going to fail. They're not have not have an outcome in half of them. In fact, you can take the wins that a Maddox or a Ryan or whatever have, and if you double their wins, that's about how many appearances they had in the big leagues. So pitchers fail half the time and hitters fail 70% of the time. That's a game of failure.
That's fair. I guess I never thought about it that way. Like if you had an NBA player who was shooting 30% from the field, you'd be like, this guy sucks. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he wouldn't get a lot of playing time. If you had an NFL quarterback whose completion percentage was 30%, I mean,
Yeah.
I just wouldn't get, I mean, he would be out of the league.
Yep, and what you're saying is what's unique about baseball. We have to learn more from our failures than we do our successes. And in life, it's the same thing. Experience is basically figuring out what doesn't work and managing the risk of failure throughout your growth from, rookie ball to eventually, hopefully, the big leagues.
This coached by negative people. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'll give you a little homework assignment throughout for the rest of today. When you're talking to your buddies, your peer group, you're listening on the radio, how many times do you hear "don't do" rather than "do"? And our society, parents included, spend a lot of time delivering a message that is received in a negative rather than a positive way. So if you're around a coach that tells you don't hang your curveball, he's really trying to say, make a good curveball pitch. So you have to reframe. And if I could throw something on everybody's lap for them to think about, whenever you hear don't do, can't do, avoid, what you need to do is reframe and ask yourself, what is my dad really trying to tell me? What is my coach really trying to tell me? And then if you reframe in your brain from a don't hang a curveball to make a good curveball pitch, then your chances of giving a message to 90 trillion cells is going to be much more effective than if it's don't do this, don't do that. And this goes with, again, I hope I mentioned that sports parenting and sports coaching are very similar in application.
I really like that reframe because there's been a ton of instances in my life when somebody has said, "Hey, don't do this," and uh, you are 100% right. I think the natural human tendency is to be risk adverse, and when you hear
Yeah.
some of these phrases like "don't do this," "watch out for that," "be careful here," you immediately kind of go into your own shell and you tiptoe around and you say, all right, I need to be extra careful around this, or I need to watch out for this. And you do feel it in your body. Like sometimes I do get like a physical response. Like my body tenses up, right? Whatever the situation may be, there's obviously a lot of different ones, but I do feel that physical response of you feel tense, you feel stressed, like you feel, and I can imagine as an athlete under those conditions, you're probably not going to perform your best.
Well, you hit some talking points really well there. Stress and anxiety are a huge part of sports. And we used to think that stress and anxiety was really bad. Well, it turns out that the research is showing that stress is really good. Distress is not so good. Distress is when you've got a 10-pound load for a 5-pound bag. And what you have to do is manage your stress to where it's tolerable and it doesn't beat you up into the negative side of the equation. So having a little stress in your life is way better than having no stress at all. It builds character, it builds the ability to deal with adversity. And then anxiety, and I've really changed my thoughts on anxiety. And do you mind if I do a little teaching here, Nick?
Tom, I
So,
never listen for the rest of this interview. I never want you to ask me if you can go into a specific topic or if you can talk about anything.
okay,
The floor is
awesome.
completely yours.
Yeah. And this has just come about in the last 5 years. Have we started to understand the place of anxiety in a human's life? Human beings are the only primate out there that can worry about something that hasn't happened. Now think about that for a second. How many times in your life have you been worrying about a test, a game coming up, a fight with your girlfriend, whatever it might be? And the ability of a human being to set the stage and worry about it has been a survival thing. They can predict and visualize something that hasn't happened and make it happen in without the risk of being out there, like saber-toothed tigers. You can worry about seeing one on Wednesday, and this is only Monday. We worried about pitching in a ball game on Saturday, and this is only Friday. So we've learned to manage not just stress, but the thought processes that are involved with anxiety. And what you're going to find out is the athletes that are most successful are the ones that are able to play the game before the game, deal with all, not, maybe not to the intensity that game time presents, but they can filter all the variables of a game before the game has even started, and that's what we see in film review, in going through everything you're going to do when you play, and all that's left is to go out and play, or go out and take the test, and the confidence that comes with experience and knowledge is the ability to project what you've learned in the past to what you're going to be doing in the future. And that process of taking all the input that you have and matching it up with your imagination and your vision of what you'd like to do is why some guys play better than their talent dictates, and why superstars and Hall of Famers are as good as they are, because those superstars have all the physical ability. They have the uh, all, all all the toolkit mentally, and they put the two together and they play games and prepare. Their process is better than anybody else's, as well as their physical tools. I hope that made sense. So don't, if someone says we want to eliminate stress and we want to minimize your anxiety, you want to have enough stress and enough anxiety to make sure that your process will prepare you for most of what can happen in competition.
I have a quote that I'd like to share with you, and then I have a follow-up question to, what you just talked about. This quote is from Bill Burr, so he's a, pretty prominent comedian, and he says, "You're going to be fine, and even if you're not, isn't it better to exist believing you will be? And when things aren't fine, you'll handle it then." And as someone who, I think I'm getting better now. I mean, I've been working on it, certainly, but somebody who has worried about the future a ton, like I have, that quote hit home with me because it is so true. Like if you're not fine, like you're just you'll deal with it, whatever comes up. Maybe you throw a bad pitch, maybe you, right, whatever the situation may be, miss a shot, miss a wide open receiver, you'll deal with it then, and you can go back to your systems and your processes, kind of what you were referring to maybe course correct or correct some of the mistakes that you did, or maybe it's a health concern. You'll deal with it then when it comes up. And along those same lines, I've heard people say, don't worry twice. If something bad happens, I mean, you'll probably end up worrying in the moment. So why would you worry ahead of time? It's interesting though, because now when I sit here and think about it and think about this quote and what I just said about worrying twice, it seems like it almost contradicts what you just said a little bit, with actually leaning into the anxiety and maybe using it and saying, all right, well, if I'm going to worry, I'm at least going to make the best use out of this and try to prepare myself for these worst case scenarios, or try to prepare and focus more on my processes and add maybe an extra layer of detail to what I've already been doing. Is that a fair assessment?
You hit it dead on. That was exactly what you're supposed to do. And what you're going to discover, and probably you've already experienced yourself, is that worrying about it, anxiety is always way worse than actually competing. And then we have a fail-safe if you do screw something up. We use the word reframe. It's basically just rewriting the script. Say you gave up a home run and cost your team the win in the ninth inning. Well, you can go, you feel bad. You go look at the ceiling for a couple hours. You're crushed. But if you start in your mind's eye, replay that pitch, and instead of being a hanging curveball, it's a slider on the half shell, and the guy hits into a double play. If you continue to reinforce what you could or should have done, your total body homeostasis will start remembering that and not the actual happening that occurred. So the studies that they've done with when there's a death in the family or a tragedy, and how you mourn and how you deal with that type of thing, it's you get angry, you get depressed, you withdraw, and then you decide, well, life goes on. And the human body is, if you'll let it, can be a really optimistic thing. And that's where you hear the optimism bias and the confirmation bias. The athletes that survive, actually any occupation, the best athletes or the best, the most successful businessmen are the ones that can reframe a failure into something positive, and it doesn't cause their total body to be risk averse or to stop trying. And I'll use the word hope. There's I believe you said, don't fail twice. If you fail once, um, okay, it's a learning experience. But if you continue to let that failure be this, that's Einstein's definition of insanity. If you walk out your front door, turn right, and fall in a ditch, you get out of the ditch, you go back in the house, you do the same thing tomorrow and the same thing the day after, then you're not really moving forward. So when something isn't going right, ask why. Don't be afraid to make the change. And pretty soon, I'm going to take a step back. The greatest right we have as human beings is the right to change. The hardest thing to do is to change. And if you find change is very difficult for you, ask yourself why. Get it down to what is causing me to be risk averse or to have trouble changing, because that is what's holding me back. And if I could give away a skill set mentally, emotionally to everybody that's listening to this, is embrace failure as a positive thing. Just don't fail the same way twice, three times, four times. Look to failure as a teacher, and it becomes your best friend.
I love that, Tom. I want to perhaps tie in everything that we've talked about. Maybe this will work, maybe it won't. I guess we'll try it out here. Maybe we'll fail, and we're going to embrace it and turn it into a positive thing.
We won't do it next time if it fails.
Exactly. I won't ask this question again. If it doesn't hit, then we're done with this question. Um, I want to talk about players who are clutch or players who step up in big moments. You mentioned it a little bit. You alluded to it. What is that? Because I remember as a kid watching Kobe Bryant, and quick aside, I'm a huge Sacramento Kings fan, which is it's been a
Frustrating.
miserable. It's been a
Yeah.
little miserable recently.
You are a very loyal human being.
Listen, for all the lucky ladies out there who might be viewing me as a potential partner, just know that I am loyal because I've been a Sacramento Kings fan for the past 25 years. Um, but back when I was young, 01, 02, when the Kings were actually good and we were competing for titles, I used to hate Kobe Bryant. I mean, obviously he was on the Lakers. He was a huge rival, and he seemed like every time we'd play him, he just seemed to destroy us. Like that is a core memory of mine growing up is Kobe Bryant destroying the Sacramento Kings. And what's funny is as a fan, I always hated him. I was like, Kobe this, Kobe that. And then when he retired and he stopped torturing my basketball team, I grew to really respect the man and especially the work that he was doing post retirement. Obviously, a huge tragedy what happened, gone way too soon. But I started to really respect him, and then I went back and actually watched his highlights and dug up some of his stats in an unbiased way without that hatred in my heart. And what I found is it seemed like Kobe always used to step up in the clutch. Now, whether or not he made the shot, whether or not he maybe made the right play, he always seemed to have that confidence to to play big in big moments. And I've always been curious, is that something that certain athletes are just born with and it's a God-given talent? Or is that something that can be taught through some of these things that you had mentioned with I'm going to summarize it a bit, but visualization, right? Mindset, um, seeing yourself, trying to project yourself and what a successful outcome may look like, reframing failure, right? All of these topics that we've
Yeah,
discussed.
yeah.
So can it
You
be
you
taught, Tom, or
yeah.
is it a God-given ability?
It can be measured and it can be taught. I'm gonna give you a definition. The zone is when thinking is inversely proportionate to the stimulus of the environment. Let's do that again. The zone that everybody searches to get, and everybody's experienced that mindset or that state of mind. It's when thinking is inversely proportionate to the stimulus of the environment. And we have a technology called focus band, where we can actually measure the hertz of electrical activity that are going on in an athlete's brain in competition. We've done numerous golfers, numerous quarterbacks, and a whole lot of pitchers and hitters. You can actually watch what happens when an athlete gets in the zone. And it's probably a well-known fact that most athletes are ADD. And the more ADD an individual athlete is, the more chance he has to get in the zone. And it's never what you think it is for the reason it happens. It's just when your adrenaline and all those chemicals that go with body chemicals that go with game competition get so intense that your parasympathetic nervous system fires up the equivalent of a downer in your neurochemistry. And that's where you'll hear people is how I describe myself. I used to get so nervous, I got calm. And that's a physiological thing that can actually be taught, trained, and you can play the game before the game and do all your imagery and manage the process before you even get in competition. So yes, it can be taught. It can be mastered. The ones that, Kobe and uh, pick up Greg Maddux, whatever the athlete is that just seems to produce when it's that time, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, those athletes matched physical tools with the mental emotional capacity to manage their brain chemistry and arrive at a performance state that few people in the real world can duplicate. And it's always like Medal of Honor winners are never the 6'3" stud Marine that you think they are. They're always some, I won't call him a doofus, but some middle America guy wearing glasses that just rises to the moment. It can be taught, it can be managed, and it can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how good you are at the process. I got to hit process again. Everybody talks about, oh, its process is outcome is awesome. You cannot control an outcome. Outcomes happen. You can be the best prepared person on the planet for a specific task, and something will happen to cause you to get defeated by that point in time. But if your process and a consistently applied day in and day out um, application, you have a better chance to succeed than the competition you're facing. So the best athlete doesn't always win. The best prepared athlete wins, and the same with teams. So if that concept can be put to good use, look at your preparation, look at your process. And like I'm a perfect example of I should never have pitched in the big leagues. I only threw 84 miles an hour. I had a pretty good breaking ball I could, command. And I learned how to make the ball move a little extra with a scratch seam or a little dirt in a seam, whatever it might be. So, and my physical tools were probably a little bit less than average big league, but my mental emotional tools were significantly better. And that combination literally made me a slightly below average big league pitcher. And that's what I was for 9 years.
Tom, as I sit here and I talk with you, and I remember even when I started this podcast as a fan of sports and obviously watching a lot of these big time players, I used to think, wow, like it's really incredible how they never seem nervous, or wow, it's really incredible how they never deal with anxiety, or wow, it's incredible that they just never seem stressed. Like I watched Tom Brady down 28-3, jog out calmly onto the field and lead his team back in probably the greatest comeback in football history. I remember sitting there watching him being like, wow, I wish I could be like him where I was just never nervous about anything, or I was never stressed about anything. Because listen, I'm not out there leading the Patriots to a Super Bowl, but everyone has certain stresses in their life. Everyone has certain things that makes them nervous. And so I was saying there, I was like, wow, like to be Tom Brady, how amazing that must be. And then obviously I realized I was dumb and I was misinformed because a lot of these athletes struggle with the exact same things that us mere mortals also struggle with. And I remember reading a piece on
That's
Steph
perfect.
Curry.
What you just said is perfect. What piece did you read?
Well, I read a piece from ESPN on Steph Curry and how he deals with performance anxiety. And I remember reading that, and it really transformed the way that I view these athletes because I'm like, wow, Steph Curry, the greatest shooter of all time, before he goes out into the court, is having to manage this performance anxiety and go through the same trials and tribulations in his mind that a lot of us go through maybe before a big meeting or a presentation or whatever your deepest, darkest fear is. And I don't know. I don't think that there's a question at the back end of all these statements that I've just made, but it really changed the way I view a lot of these athletes.
If I could, I might be able to summarize. You always wondered why those guys were special. They actually, and again, I've been blessed that I've got to work with Tom Brady for about 11 years. I got to work with Drew Brees. I got to work with Nolan Ryan. Um, I get to work with the Phil Mickelsons, and I've seen Hall of Fame athletes in 3 different sports. They get just as nervous as you and I do. They get just as anxiety. They have the same dissonances, the same fears that you and I do. But what they figured out, they manage those fears, they manage their process in a way that's actually going to help them. And then you mix that in with superior tools physically, and that's why they're Hall of Famers. But if you could say one thing, and you kind of said it in your own words, even the Super Hall of Famers get just as nervous as you and I do. They just have managed the process better for their need state, and their numbers reflect that.
I think my one of my big takeaways from this conversation thus far, Tom, is to a lot of the things that we view in life as negative, specifically referring to perhaps anxiety and stress. A lot of people will view those things and say, "Oh, I need to stay away from that." We've been told stress is bad for you, can cause all these health issues. We've been told anxiety is bad for you. Anxiety is a warning sign from your body. Um, but in reality, maybe some of these things are actually quite beneficial. And I think it goes into your reframe of, hey, maybe try to turn some of these things into a positive and maybe let it help focus and make you a little more intentional with some of the work that you're doing.
That's a huge key that you just mentioned. You have to be able to problem identification is half your solution.
Mm.
If you've identified a problem, you're halfway to your solution. But in that solution, it's got to be something that is skill specific to you. You can't ask your body to do something it's incapable of doing or that you haven't prepared for. So I'll give you an example. If you ask a 4-year-old playing in the sandbox what he wants to be when he grows up, you'll get answers like, I want to be a fire truck, or I want to be a doll. And a 4-year-old can imagine anything. Well, realistically, as he grows and gets out and starts dealing with society and jobs and all that kind of stuff, his imagination gets channeled a different way. So the ability to imagine something, you ask someone, like I'm sneaking up on 80, you ask an 80-year-old to use his imagination. And that's where wisdom comes in. Wisdom comes in because you've been through all the hard knocks, you've been through everything to realize that with wisdom, you can see what I would call pillars you can put together that nobody else would put together. And that's where experience and knowledge create the imagery for someone like myself to get past the current situation and improve from what you've just learned to improve your chances of being better with things that haven't happened yet. And our initial conversation when we first started, we're matching up old age and treachery, which would be Coach Tom, with youth and exuberance, which would be Coach Nick, and come out better for the experience. And that's the beautiful thing about what's happening in today's sports world. And as I'm getting older and older, I realize that the lessons that sports teach are also life lessons. I don't know if you know, but I was diagnosed with Parkinson's about 15 years ago, and I thought it was quote a death sentence. It's not. You can make whatever it might be work for you. I've managed to stay relevant only because I didn't give in to what Parkinson's at that time was kind of a death sentence. And because I didn't give in, we're making a difference now in the Parkinson's world. When I say we, I have some really, really smart people that I work with, some caregivers that put it together. And I just look at Parkinson's almost the same way I looked at professional baseball when I saw him out of USC. You manage the process. You be the best you can be day in and day out. At the end of the day, you look back on your day and you say, okay, what would I do different tomorrow that I wasn't good at today? And if you can write down 2 or 3 things and you can improve over yesterday, even if it's just one thing better, then you're going to be relative to what your need state and capacity is. You're going to be a success at whatever you're trying to fix.
Tom, that's so well said. And I was familiar with your diagnosis, and you know, very sorry about that. But one of the reasons why, in addition to all the work that you've done in the realm of sports, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because how much of an inspiration you've been, not just to myself, but I think to millions of people around the world, with how you've dealt with Parkinson's and how you continue to fight and be the best version of yourself. It truly is an inspiration, and just being able to sit down with you and pick your brain for the time that we have is a true honor. So I can't thank you enough. I did want to go back to this idea of intentionality,
Okay.
and a lot of the things that we've talked about, even what you just said, right, with writing down the 1 or 2 things that you can be better at from yesterday. A lot of the tools that you've already given us with how to manage expectations, how to manage anxiety, how to manage stress, the art of imagery, the art of visualization, all these different tools, they're all fine and dandy, but in my opinion, they require you to be intentional. You actually have to sit down and you have to ask yourself, okay, what is the 1 or 2 things that I want to become better at? And I think a lot of people in today's world kind of just go out throughout the day on autopilot. You have a certain routine, you go about your day, you're distracted by your phone, you're distracted by your computer, you're distracted by the latest piece of news, you're distracted by all these different stimuli that come in, that you don't really have the time to be intentional and to really work on yourself in the manners that you've described. So I'm curious, and maybe it's an example from an athlete, or maybe it's an example from your own story. How do we become more intentional, and how do these athletes, how are they so intentional?
I'll give you a little formula you can play with. This is for yourself, people that you care about. I try to share it wherever I go. The one thing that everybody in the world has the same amount of is time. So start with that. In a day, you have 24 hours. Subtract the amount of time you sleep. Subtract from that 24 hours the time you have to work at something that you just have to do. It wouldn't be your choice, but you still going to school, whatever it might be. Subtract that time. How much time do you spend with your girlfriend? How much time do you spend on social media? Subtract it all the way down. Most people in the world, no matter what their profession or their age group or their talent base is, will have 2 to 3 hours of discretionary time to either make themselves better, to tread water, or to fail. And what you need to ask yourself as a human being, with my discretionary time, my 2 to 3 hours, what am I doing with it? And is it something that's going to make me better and the people around me better? It can't be just a selfish me thing. It has to be a we thing. because you get better as a function of your environment. Think about it this way: faith, family, friends, and affiliation. And sports is probably the only vehicle out there where it doesn't make any difference your race, your politics. It's a meritocracy that everybody enjoys. Everybody has fun doing. And it's a chance for you to develop life skills around your faith, your family, your friends, and your affiliation. When you're on a team, you learn to feel bad for one of your teammates when they did poorly. You learn how to uh, deal with adversity yourself, and the joy of winning a game or winning a World Series is the uh, the reward for all the crap that you have to go through to put yourself in a situation where you can have a win and a loss. The one frustrating thing I see about the internet, social media, and sometimes parents is they don't want their kid to fail. You know, failure is, you got to avoid it. You got to be careful. It's just, but unless you screwed something up, you really don't understand the perspective of winning something. But once you take ownership, and that's a word I use, if you're authentic about taking ownership to getting better with a toolkit you've been dealt, that ownership is going to dictate how you feel about your life. And my challenge is play sports as long as you can. Be an athlete till you're 80 years old with Parkinson's and your athleticism now. Your wife beats you at golf. Your wife beats you at everything you do. And you used to do pretty good. But at this point in time, not as good as I can be today. That's all you can do. And if that, what I like about young folks like yourself that are on these podcasts, it allows people that would never access the access to something different. So you probably don't realize how important you are in today's world. And all I would ask you to do is challenge the people you're talking to understand what we've been talking about. Risk management, failure management is how you get ahead. And if you are the best you can be at whatever you do in a given day, and you take that extra 2 to 3 hours to continue to challenge the, you know, put the barometer a little higher, don't be satisfied with what you did yesterday. Try to get better at one thing a day. And that one thing a day, whether it's physical, mental, nutritional, whatever it might be, will give you quality of life. And when you look at yourself in the mirror, when it's that time, you'll have a smile at yourself because you did a good job.
One of the favorite things that sports taught me, so I played water polo in high school, and water polo is one of those sports that it's very clear when someone is better than you in the water. Like, it's interesting because if someone's stronger than you, like, there's not much that you can do. You're kinda just at the mercy of their strength. Like, I remember fighting with some guys in the water and thinking to myself, like, "You know what? I can't do anything against
This
this."
is
Like,
yeah, this is a dead end. Yeah.
this is a dead end. This guy's way better than me. But my favorite thing that I've learned from sports is when someone is better than you or when a team is better than you, how first of all, how do you react to that? Do you sit there and mope and say, "Well, they're better than us," or "Hey, this guy's better than me?" Or do you take responsibility to what you just said and say, "You know what? God damn it, like, this guy is better than me, but I am going to improve and I'm gonna become a better version of myself. So the next time I match up with him, I'm gonna be able to fight with him in the water." And it really translates to, in my opinion, everything in life. And it's why I say it's my favorite lesson that I've learned from sports is because sports forces you to admit that sometimes people are better than you. Sometimes a team is better than you. And you just have to deal with that. Same with podcasting. I could extrapolate it to everything. Sometimes a podcast is better than mine. Someone maybe asks better questions, is a better interviewer, right? And I have to deal with that. And I can sit here and mope and say, well, I'm never going to amount to anything, and people aren't going to listen to this. Or I can sit there and say, all right, well, maybe let me learn from that person. Maybe they're doing something I'm not. How can I improve? How can I take the 2 to 3 hours that you just mentioned to become a better version, become a better interviewer? So that's my favorite lesson from sports because as a lot of things with sports, it applies to many different areas of life. But I think this mindset of, yes, someone is better than you. Yes, there are people who have more than you. What are you going to do about it?
Exactly. And I'm going to expand on it because you gave me permission. My first bullpen at USC, with Rod Dato, who was the coach of the century, watching, was the guy that was throwing on my right was a guy named Tom Seaver. And I'm throwing on the left-hand side, and Dato was watching us. And I won a lot of games. In 4 years of high school and summer ball, I was like 84-2. So I'm thinking I'm something special. And I'm throwing my little dab, and I'm looking at this monster next to me throwing, who is literally, I'm going, oh my God, this is. So Dato comes up, he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he said, Tommy House, what do you think of young Tom Seaver? And I said, Rod, if you need me to be him, you got the wrong left-hander. He said, no, 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 no. Now hold that thought. He said, I don't want you to be Tom Seaver. I want you to be the best Tom House you can be. And the Tom House that I brought to USC to pitch throws a curveball for a strike, a screwball for a strike, doesn't walk anybody, and holds runners close. Tom Seaver, on the other hand, he's going to be a number one draft choice. He can literally turn a game all by himself. You're both going to play in the big leagues. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, and you'll be lucky to pay the bills, but you're both going to get to the big leagues. Just be Tom House. And that took so much pressure off of my back that I didn't have to be Tom Seaver. I just had to do what I did best, which is curveball, screwball, a little cut fastball, and let's go to war. So you have to get lucky with who mentors you as a coach. And at every stage of my career, from high school all the way through the big leagues, there was a coach and individual that basically mentored me for what I needed to do to be me. So as a parent, as an athlete, as a coach, make sure that you master information, master instruction, mentor a kid, and that's how you make a difference in their life.
Yeah, I love that. I recently had Gannon Baker on the pod, who is a very prominent NBA skills coach. He's a skills coach. He's a life coach as well, but he's worked with Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Steph Curry. List goes on and on. Hall of Fame resume. And I remember asking him during an interview. I said, "Do you think that the grind is overrated?" And he said, "Well, I really don't know how to answer that because it depends on you. Some people can work 20 hours a day and sleep 4 hours a night and be perfectly fine. Other people need 10 to 12 hours of sleep and can only work for short, limited spurts." He said, "You ultimately need to decide what's best for you." And I think it ties in with a little bit of the story that you just told with, don't focus on being someone else, focus on being the best version of yourself. And you brought up social media and the internet. And one of the recent things that I've noticed is a lot of people will take the advice or the lifestyle of, prominent entrepreneurs, Elon Musk, whoever, pick your favorite entrepreneur, right? And even like a lot of these athletes, they'll take their advice and their lifestyle and they'll just take it like it's the gospel and say, okay, this person is doing things this way, so I must do things in this manner to achieve success. When in reality, you need to figure out what's best for you and what actually suits you. Um,
Exactly.
and so that's been one thing, because I used to follow a lot of advice blindly, and even the advice that we've given on this podcast today. Like, I would encourage people to take the advice in, try it out for yourself, and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, maybe there's another process or another system that works better for you.
Exactly.
But
And I'm going to give you what that's called. It's called personally adapting. There's
mhm,
one set of rules. We all have to live by rules. It's just society. That's how society
right,
exists. And the rules are even more strict in sport. But for every absolute that you have to follow to play baseball or football or basketball, it's how you personally adapt to that need state that dictates your success in the long haul. And success is a relative term also. Financial success, if I would have had the same years that I had early in my career, I would be a multimillionaire. I would have been able to retire, 10, 12 years ago. But that wasn't the way. My first year in the big leagues, we made $12,000 was what the yearly salary was. And they get that for an autograph session now. So it isn't about money. It's about being successful with what toolkit you have to work with. It's personally adaptive, cross-specific to what your position slash need is on your ball club. And if you keep, you're not going to be successful. Even the superstars aren't going to be successful every day. If you keep trying to be the best you can be, there will be a team, there will be a coach, there will be a situation where your skill set will match up with what the need of the basic at that point in time capacity, and you never look back. And I think I'm really blessed because I've never really worked for a living. I've gone to the ballpark every day as a coach or a player, um, and came back from the ballpark with a positive experience. Even when I got my butt kicked, there's always something you can smile about. How many jobs in the world are there better than sports? In sports, you laugh every day. And if I could throw one more thing on the pile that we've been talking about, if you're not laughing or smiling about something, if you don't have joy in your competition and your preparation, you probably should be doing something else. If when you're driving to the ballpark, you're dreading the experience, it's called neural stagnation from monotonous overtraining. It's time to go do something else.
Smile more. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that advice. It's simple, but I do think that, and it goes back to our discussion, your discussion on hope and having an optimistic mindset. Tom, a couple more questions to round us out, and I will let you go. I was wondering. So actually, let me do this question first. You've worked with a lot of, we've mentioned it, a lot of prominent athletes. What do you think is the one mental mistake that they all make, or is there one mental mistake that seems to be common amongst all of them?
The if I can really be critical, the superstars very seldom fall into it. But you have to be aware, are you playing to do a job or are you playing to keep your job? That distinction is the difference for me. It's like when a team goes into prevent defense, they've given up trying to score. So ask yourself, am I working to do a job or am I working to keep my job? And what happens, I won't call it complacency, but after 3 or 4 years in the big leagues, athletes will settle in and they'll play not to go to the minor leagues. Instead of going between the lines, going to practice, doing their extra work with a Mach 3 hair on fire mentality. So did that make sense? Make sure when you're doing your self-evaluation that you're, you know, playing to do your job, not just keep your job.
I'm curious. You've worked with Drew Brees, Tom Brady. We mentioned it, and you have had a huge impact on their career, and I'm sure have taught them many valuable lessons that they still use to this day. But if we were to flip that, what do you think that they like? What's something that they taught you, or how did you change as a person after working with them?
Well, and I learned early on as a coach and a parent um, that you have to be authentic. You can't let the bubble and the biggest issue that these superstars have is people that never confront them. They never critique. They they literally are in the bubble to stay in the bubble. They like the lifestyle. So I made up my mind early on when I was a minor league pitching coach and when I was actually trying to be a good dad that I was gonna take every situation at face value and teach to the best of my ability the best way to solve this problem. And I never compromised that authenticity. I never told a Brady or a Brees or a Nolan Ryan or whoever it might be something that wasn't truthful about trying to make them better. And I think they appreciated that. And that's why they keep coming back or they send me people because as a coach or a parent, if you bend to the situation and you don't give the best that you have, telling the truth, if you tell Rod Dale had it best, tell the truth, do the right thing when nobody's looking, and when it makes your mother proud. Those three things are a life lesson. Tell the truth, do the right thing when nobody's looking, and would it make your mother proud? If you do those three things, you can't go wrong.
Tom, one last question for you. This might be a little
Sure.
bit of a fun one. If you could mentor one athlete right now or coach one athlete that you haven't worked with before, I'm curious who you would pick and what would you love to work on with them? Phrased differently, is there one athlete right now that you look at and you say, "Ah, if only I had the opportunity to coach them or talk to them, I would tell them this one thing." Who would that athlete be?
There isn't just one. I couldn't do that. When I watch on TV, when I listen, when I'm actually in the same clubhouse, um, I have things that I'd love to share, but I can't think of any one person that I'd rather work with over someone else. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you that and I haven't said this more than a few times in my life. My favorite group to work with are the 12 and unders. They are so pure, and when you do something that feels good to them, they just radiate. And of all the and I've been blessed to work with Hall of Famer, and I've been blessed to work at every level in 3 different sports. But I still, when I show up and I've got 20 little leaguers, pre-adolescents, that day is gonna be a fun day because it is pure. And in today's world, if we can get that 12 to 14-year-old to get ignition about a sport, and if they just play through high school, if they just play that extra 4 years, they're healthier, they're more productive, they deal with adversity. So I think sports is, and I'm doing a little preaching here. As good as I think I am as a coach or a teacher, um, we're only scratching the surface on keeping these pre-adolescents to play through high school. And that's what, before I punch my ticket, I'm going to make sure that everything I've done is aimed at that.
I was gonna say I can resonate with that, but I can't to your level. But I did. I can't remember if it was second grade or third grade basketball. There was one season I coached I think it was a second grade basketball team. I gotta say it was probably the most fun I've ever had in my life. And I'm not just saying that for the podcast or to, just for the story. Like it truly was. To your point, there is something so pure when you're
Yeah, it's
teaching a group
pure.
of kids.
That's the magic word. It's pure.
It's
There's
just pure.
nothing that
Like
gets in. Yeah,
there is nothing like you are just. It's I don't know. Yeah, it's like difficult to even put into words. It's like one of those experiences that you truly have to go out there. And I encourage everyone listening to this, if you played sports growing up and you have some expertise, even if you don't, I mean, go out, get involved in youth sports, coach a team, be around a team, try to impart some of your wisdom. We all have wisdom and advice that we'd love to share with others. Go try and impart that on some of these young kids because um, listen, at the end of the day, you are doing like you are coaching up the younger generation, but I guarantee you when you come home that night, you will look back on that and say, "Wow, that was such a fun time."
exactly. And it's what you're doing with, if all your podcasts are as easy and fun as this one was, then you're sneaking up on superstardom as a podcaster. But this was a, this was fun. And again, when I can't remember how you and I think it's through Lindsay or maybe I don't know how, but when they recommended you, they said you're like family. And that's
Mm.
exactly what they're like. This was really positive for me. I had a good time.
I appreciate that, Tom. That means more than you know. Yeah, that it's probably the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me on this podcast. So I truly
Well, if I'll
appreciate
tell you
that.
what, if you were horseshit, I'd tell you that too. So,
Yeah, well that well that's why it means so much because you have a life's worth of experience telling people, "Hey, be better." So I
yeah.
appreciate
Well
that.
done. Well, we have to do this again. I think as the summer progresses, I think I'm in line for a trial where I might have a chance to cure the Parkinson's. And if
Mm.
I do, I'm going to coach till I'm 100. So we might have to do this another 20 or 30 times, okay?
I Tom, you don't have to you don't have to tell me twice. I mean, I'll do this. I'll do this every week if you want.
Okay.
Tom House, thanks so much for coming on. Tom, before we sign off, where can people find you and more of your work?
I'll tell you what, if you can just Google tomhouse.com, you can go to Team Mustard, TEAMMSTRD.com. You can go to National Pitching. You can go to National Parkinson. And those 4 websites and organizations are what I'm doing right now. There's some really good stuff. There's some things that will open your eyes, but more than anything else, they're designed to give everybody hope for the future.
We'll put all those links in the description of this podcast episode. Highly suggest you go check out Tom on those links. Go check out his social media. In doing research for this podcast, I went down a rabbit hole of not just you, but some of the clips that you post on Instagram and on Twitter X, whatever you want to call it nowadays. And it truly is great. So I am recommending everyone go follow you and go check out more of your content. Tom, thanks so much. We have to do a part 2. Now you're
Part
locked in. I
two.
don't know if you realized it, but you are now locked into a part 2. So
No, part two works. We just have to figure out when.
love it, Tom. Thanks again for coming on.
Okay, have a blessed day.
Bye.